From our understanding, it was Will Smith featuring Dru Hill. But when we got there, it seemed like it was all in the cards for it to be Will Smith featuring Sisqo. Once again, you begged to just being here just for the sake of being here. And that was basically my departure.
We're at the top of our game. We got money in the bank. We got chart-topping singles. We just came off tour. It was traumatizing.
Sisqo never forgave the Dru Hill members after what they did. For years, fans blamed outside pressure, bad management, or industry politics for breaking up one of the greatest R&B groups of the 90s.
Crowd started dwindling. As many people weren't coming to see Dru Hill perform. I think it was a direct cause and effect of what happened with Woody.
But behind the scenes, it wasn't just about contracts or radio spins. It was personal. From record label lawsuits to explosive walkouts on live radio, this wasn't just a band falling apart. It was a brotherhood ripped down the middle.
They just dropped a bomb on us and it was like, today? I mean, everybody's jaw just hit the floor.
And while Sisqo went on to chase solo fame, what happened inside Dru Hill left scars that still haven't healed. Before the platinum plaques, before the Thong Song took over MTV, and long before any public fallouts, Dru Hill was just a group of teenagers trying to get out of Baltimore. The group came together in the early 90s, formed by Nokio, the N-Tighty, who had a vision of creating a male R&B group that could blend church-trained vocals with street edge. He started scouting local talent, and the first person he approached was Jazz, a soft-spoken powerhouse who could hit notes most singers couldn't touch. Nokio brought in Sisqo, who was already well known for his high energy and flamboyant stage presence. Woody, the final original member, added a gospel background that rounded out the group's sound. They named themselves after Druid Hill Park, a well-known neighborhood spot in Baltimore, and started performing wherever they could, from talent shows to barbershops to church events. For a while, they were just trying to be heard. Their big break came when they auditioned for Island Black Music, which was looking to sign new R&B talent. The execs were blown away by their harmonies and energy. The label signed them almost immediately, and just like that, the group was on their way to becoming one of the top male R&B groups of the decade. In 1996, Dru Hill's debut single, Tell Me, landed on the Eddie movie soundtrack and caught national attention. It was followed by their self-titled debut album, which went platinum. The group quickly became known for their vocal strength, passionate live shows, and dramatic, emotional ballads. They were everything the mid-90s R&B scene was asking for. By the time their sophomore album, Enter the Dru, dropped in 1998, Dru Hill was everywhere. On BET, MTV, award shows, and even movie soundtracks. Tracks like How Deep Is Your Love and These Are the Times proved they weren't just a flash in the pan. But behind all the success, there was a quiet shift happening inside the group, and it revolved around Sisqo. While every member played a part in Dru Hill's sound, Sisqo started to stand out early. His voice was distinct, his look was different, and his stage presence was hard to ignore. Record execs noticed. So did TV producers. So did fans. Slowly, the focus began shifting from Dru Hill as a group to Sisqo as an individual. He was getting more interview time, more attention on stage, and more influence over the group's direction. At first, the others played along, but resentment started building. Jazz felt pushed into the background, despite having one of the strongest voices in the group. Woody, who had always been more soft-spoken and deeply rooted in his faith, began to feel uncomfortable with the group's increasing focus on appeal and flashy image. Nokio, who originally built the group from the ground up, felt like he was losing creative control. Then came the moment that cracked everything open: Sisqo's solo deal. In 1999, Sisqo appeared in the music video for Will Smith's Wild Wild West, without the rest of the group. That same year, he stepped away to record his solo debut, Unleash the Dragon. When Thong Song dropped, it became one of the biggest records of the year, and Sisqo officially became a solo star. But while his fame exploded, the rest of Dru Hill was left behind, and the betrayal was too obvious to ignore. By the time Unleash the Dragon hit the shelves in late 1999, it was clear Sisqo had officially outgrown Dru Hill, at least in the eyes of the industry. The album was an instant hit. Gotta Get It did well, but Thong Song was the record that exploded.
Let me see that thong.
It crossed R&B and pop charts, got heavy play on TRL, and turned Sisqo into a household name. The spiked silver hair, leather outfits, and high-flying choreography made him a one-man brand. It wasn't just a side project. Sisqo had become bigger than the group. And that's when the real cracks in Dru Hill started to show. While Sisqo was on red carpets and international tours, the rest of the group was in limbo. There were no new group sessions, no studio time, and no label meetings that included everyone. To fans, it looked like the group was just taking a break. But inside, things were falling apart. The label, seeing the numbers, began investing more into Sisqo than the group that made him. This didn't sit well with Nokio, Jazz, or Woody. They had sacrificed just as much to build Dru Hill from the ground up. They had toured together, written together, struggled together. But now they were being treated like background players in their own story. In interviews from that time, Nokio hinted at being pushed to the side creatively. Jazz admitted he was tired of not being heard, and Woody, who had long struggled with the group's direction, finally had enough.
From our understanding, it was Will Smith featuring Dru Hill. But when we got there, it seemed like it was all in the cards for it to be Will Smith featuring Sisqo. Once again, you back to just being here just for the sake of being here. And that was basically my departure.
Woody was the first to walk away. Frustrated with the music industry, uncomfortable with the group's new image, and dealing with personal issues behind the scenes, he made the decision to leave Dru Hill and return to gospel music. He didn't hold a press conference or throw shots. He just quietly stepped away.
Spiritually, I felt like that I was being called to not be in the group.
But that quiet exit said a lot. Dru Hill had always been marketed as a tight-knit brotherhood. With Woody gone, that illusion started to fade. Around this time, Sisqo was asked constantly about the group. His responses were always diplomatic. He'd say they were on pause, that they'd get back together eventually. But the truth was, the more successful he became, the less reason there was to return to Dru Hill. He had label backing, media attention, and a growing solo catalog. Why go back to being part of a group when you're being treated like a superstar? Still, the rest of the group wasn't done. Nokio and Jazz tried to keep things moving. In 2002, they brought in 2 new members, Scola and Rufus, to help revive the brand. Sisqo was involved, but it wasn't the same. The chemistry was different. The energy was off. Their third studio album, Dru World Order, didn't land the way the first 2 did. Fans could feel that something was missing, and a big part of that was trust. Behind the scenes, resentment kept growing. The remaining members felt Sisqo had abandoned them. And when he finally came back, it wasn't as a teammate. It was as the frontman who had already gone solo. That dynamic never really went away. And no matter how many times they reunited, that tension stayed right under the surface. By the early 2000s, the energy that once made Dru Hill stand out had turned into a problem they couldn't hide. The group that once harmonized effortlessly on stage was now constantly at odds behind the scenes. Every member had their own version of what went wrong, but nearly all of those stories pointed back to the same tension. Sisqo's fame had eclipsed the group, and no one ever really dealt with it. When Dru World Order dropped in 2002, the label framed it as a triumphant return. Woody had stepped away again, replaced by new member Scola. They had a few strong tracks. I Should Be made some noise, but the chemistry felt forced.
I should be a boyfriend.
Sisqo was front and center again. The group appeared together, but they didn't feel like a unit anymore. Jazz's vocals were underused, Nokio's creative control had slipped, and fans noticed the difference. Album sales reflected it. The group that had gone double platinum in the 90s couldn't even crack gold. Behind the scenes, resentment had built up for years. During live shows, Nokio sometimes refused to engage with fans. Jazz looked checked out. Sisqo would perform solo material in the middle of Dru Hill sets, dancing under spotlights while the others stood in the shadows. There were reports that the group traveled on separate flights, stayed in different hotels, and barely spoke outside of rehearsals. Things came to a head in 2008 during a now infamous interview on WPGC 95.5 in Washington, D.C. The group had reunited again, this time with Woody back in the mix, and were doing promo for a new single, If You Fall. The interview started normal, with questions about the group's history and future plans. But when the host brought up the constant lineup changes, Nokio snapped. He stood up, yanked off his headphones, and walked out of the studio mid-broadcast. Jazz followed seconds later, clearly frustrated. Sisqo stayed in his chair, trying to salvage the moment. But the damage was done. Woody never even showed up for the interview. That wasn't just a bad press moment. It was a live, unfiltered breakdown of a group in real time. The footage went viral. Fans couldn't believe what they were seeing. Years of quiet frustration had just erupted in front of microphones. The walkout wasn't staged. It was raw, and it showed just how far the group had drifted from the brotherhood they used to claim. The internal breakdowns didn't stop there. After Woody left again, Scola was pushed out without any formal announcement. Tao, a new member with a gospel background, was brought in after a talent search on BET's Sunday Best. But even that fresh start didn't fix things. Interviews became uncomfortable. During a 2010 appearance on The Monique Show, Jazz and Nokio barely spoke. Sisqo dominated the conversation, once again talking like a solo artist who just happened to be sitting next to a group. And the revolving door kept spinning. In 2018, Dru Hill made another surprise announcement. They were adding 2 more members, Smoke E. DeGlera and Digital Black, from the R&B group Playa. The move came out of nowhere and raised eyebrows immediately. By that point, Dru Hill had included more former members than current ones. Woody, Scola, Tao, all gone. Jazz was in and out. Nokio was allegedly done with the group. Fans started asking, who exactly was Dru Hill now? Sisqo remained the face through all of it. He showed up for every reunion. He performed his solo hits on group stages. He did interviews as the de facto leader, even if others didn't agree with that role. And while his fame helped keep Dru Hill's name relevant, it also made reconciliation nearly impossible. You can't rebuild trust when only one person's voice is being heard, and that person already had a platinum solo career. At this point, every reunion felt like a remix. New members, new energy, same problems. There were no fights caught on tape, but there were walkouts, no shows, and interviews where group members would side-eye each other between answers. What was once one of the tightest male groups in R&B had become a cautionary tale, not just about the industry, but about ego, miscommunication, and the cost of never healing old wounds. By the 2010s, Dru Hill was operating more like a legacy act than an active group. The big chart hits were behind them, and their new music barely moved the needle. Still, the nostalgia factor was strong. R&B fans remembered the harmonies, the choreography, the raw emotion. Promoters knew they could still sell tickets off name recognition alone. So, reunion tours became the plan, not because everything had been fixed, but because business demanded it. But if fans were hoping for real healing between the members, they were disappointed. Every time the group came back together, the cracks showed almost immediately. The chemistry was off. There were missed cues on stage, awkward body language during interviews, and long stretches where certain members didn't show up at all. The most noticeable absentee was Nokio. Nokio had been one of the original architects of Dru Hill. He wasn't just a singer, he was a writer, producer, and the glue behind the early years. But after a while, he started distancing himself from the group. In a 2020 interview, he admitted that being part of Dru Hill had taken a toll on his mental health. He didn't like the direction the group was going, didn't agree with the constant lineup changes, and felt like the energy had become toxic. Without naming names, he made it clear that there were people in the group he no longer trusted, and many fans assumed he was talking about Sisqo.
It's all fun and games watching it on TV or, listening to the songs, but in real life, it's like people out here who want to be in positions and, whatever it is that you want to call it, and they're not equipped to do it.
Sisqo, on the other hand, never fully forgave Nokio for pulling away. Publicly, he remained diplomatic, saying things like, "We'll always be brothers," or "There's nothing but love." But in more candid moments, he hinted at deeper issues. In one radio interview, when asked about Nokio's absence from recent shows, Sisqo shrugged and said, "If you don't want to be part of this, then don't be. But don't try to stop the rest of us from moving forward." That comment didn't go unnoticed. Fans picked up on the passive aggression, the undertone of resentment. And it wasn't the first time Sisqo had subtly called out his former bandmates. On stage, during a 2018 show, he paused before singing "Incomplete" and said, "I've always had to carry this on my back." The crowd cheered, but those who knew the history understood exactly what he meant. The problem wasn't just that Sisqo was successful on his own, it was that he never seemed to let the others forget it. That created a power dynamic the group could never balance. Even when Nokio and Jazz were present, it felt like they were operating in Sisqo's shadow. When new members joined, like Tao, Smoke, or Black, they were treated like supporting cast, not equals. Every reunion came with promises: a new album, a world tour, a reset. But the patterns never changed. Members would show up for a few appearances, then disappear. Interviews would start strong, then end with awkward silences or offhand comments. And while no one ever said it outright, the message was clear. The group might be together on paper, but emotionally, they were miles apart. The more time passed, the more fans realized the truth. This wasn't a group healing from the past. This was a business arrangement, one that kept falling apart because the wounds never truly closed. By the late 2010s and into the early 2020s, Dru Hill had become a rotating door of new faces, old grudges, and unresolved baggage. At this point, most fans weren't even sure who was officially in the group anymore. Nokio was in and out. Jazz had disappeared again. Tao had been quietly replaced. Smoke and Black from Playa were added out of nowhere. It got to the point where each public appearance came with a new lineup, and the original identity of Dru Hill, the one fans fell in love with in the 90s, was all but gone. Sisqo, meanwhile, never stepped away. He remained the face of the brand, the one consistent figure in every version of the group. But even though he was the most active, he was also the most guarded. Over the years, in multiple interviews, it became obvious he still carried resentment, especially toward the original members. While he never named names, his tone said enough. In one Breakfast Club interview, when asked if the original group would ever tour again, Sisqo smiled and said, "Some people made their choice. That door's not locked, but it ain't wide open either." The hurt wasn't just about business, it was personal. Sisqo had always felt like the group didn't support him during his solo run, that instead of celebrating his success, they held it against him. And while he rarely lashed out publicly, the few times he did, he made it clear that forgiveness hadn't come easy. He'd refer to old members as people who didn't want to work, or say, "I carried this group when no one else showed up." Whether fair or not, that narrative stuck, and it only deepened the divide between him and those he once called brothers. For fans watching from the outside, it was frustrating. The talent was still there. Vocally, they could still destroy a live show, but the drama always got in the way. Even their attempts at releasing new music were chaotic. In 2020, they dropped a new single called What You Need, teasing a new album. But just months later, one of the new members hinted at internal disagreements. Again, nothing ever stuck because the foundation was never repaired. And then there was the public pettiness. In one IG Live session, a fan asked Sisqo if he still talked to Nokio. Sisqo paused, smirked, and replied, "You'd have to ask him. He talks a lot." The comment seemed small, but longtime fans knew exactly what he meant. He was tired of being blamed, tired of carrying the weight, but also unwilling to fully let the past go. Nokio, on the other hand, had largely gone quiet. In a 21 interview, he admitted he was done with the drama, but also admitted that certain wounds might never heal. He never directly disrespected Sisqo, but the message was clear. Some bridges had burned too badly to rebuild. At this point, the Dru Hill name still sells tickets, but it doesn't carry the same meaning it once did. The brand is scattered, the brotherhood is broken, and the legacy is locked in a strange space, half celebrated, half exhausted. Fans still show up, but not for what it is today. They show up for what it used to be. More than 25 years after they first broke through, Dru Hill is still active, at least in name. They still perform. They still book reunion shows. They've still got fans who sing every word when Beauty or In My Bed comes on. But what's left of the group now is more business than brotherhood. The original lineup, the one that defined an era in R&B, hasn't stood together in harmony or in spirit for a very long time. At the center of that fracture is Sisqo. He's never stopped working, never stopped touring, never stopped reminding the world that he was, and still is, the most recognized member of the group. But he's also never fully let go of what happened. In interviews, in social media posts, and sometimes even on stage, he makes it clear that certain things were never forgiven. When fans ask about Nokio, Jazz, or Woody, he keeps it brief. They made their choices. I can't speak for them. Ask them. It's not anger anymore. It's detachment. Like a wall was built, and he doesn't see a reason to break it down. And truthfully, many fans can't blame him. When he went solo, he didn't just chase stardom, he caught it. Thong Song wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural moment. He gave the group name visibility, kept it alive during years when no one else was pushing it forward. But what he saw as loyalty, others saw as control. What he believed was leadership, the rest experienced as dominance. And over time, those views were never reconciled. The biggest tragedy in Dru Hill's story isn't that they broke up. It's that they never had a real conversation in front of their fans about why. Other groups have done it. Jagged Edge, 112, even B2K aired out their issues and found ways to move forward, or at least bring clarity. Dru Hill never did. Every reunion was patched together last minute. Every interview danced around the real questions. Every lineup change was brushed off like it didn't matter. But it did matter. Woody left twice. Jazz faded out without warning. Nokio openly said being in the group damaged his mental health. And Sisqo, for all his loyalty to the name, never gave the impression he truly missed the people in it. That pain was never unpacked. That silence was never broken. And that's why, even now, fans feel like the group never really came back. They just kept performing under the same name. Dru Hill should have been one of the greatest R&B groups of all time. And in some ways, they still are. The music holds up. The vocals were undeniable. But what they left behind is a story of what happens when success moves faster than trust, and when egos harden before wounds can heal. And maybe that's why Sisqo never really forgave them, because somewhere deep down, he probably never believed they forgave him either. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.